Alright guys, so the next task on the to-do list, and actually the Perkins guys are coming out again today to help out, is going to be to get rid of these windows. And I know you guys might think I'm crazy basically boarding up the windows here in the shop, but there's a few reasons I'm doing that. First and foremost, this is essentially a woodworking video studio. All of the natural light that comes through here on a sunny day is really challenging from a filming perspective. That's number one. Number two is security. These windows are garbage. This panel is glass right here, but this one is just a piece of plexiglass, which I guess is why they put these bars up here. But this is definitely not a super secure setup. But then also in the same vein, number three is the kind of insulative properties and the air sealing aspect of these really crappy windows. They are awful. So what we're going to be doing is basically framing out a mini stud wall inside this window opening, putting a layer of Zip R sheathing, and then on top of that we'll throw a layer of the hardy board type material that I had in the metalworking section at the old shop. And then as soon as the windows are done, we can start framing the walls in front of these concrete walls to brace them. So that's kind of why we're doing this first, because those windows need to be knocked out prior to the walls. So we'll see the Perkins guys here in a second. So as soon as the Perkins guys arrived, the windows were promptly demoed and removed. Oh, there you go. Boom. That was close. And since these walls are concrete block, we used treated material here to avoid any moisture damage and fasten the plates to the walls with concrete anchors. We also added a heavy bead of sealant between the plates and the block to keep any moisture and air outside. We repeated the same process for the right and leftmost studs, attaching them to the concrete block in the same way, and this cordless DeWalt SDS drill was super handy here. It even has built-in dust collection, which made it easy to keep our lungs nice and clean. Once the boards around the perimeter were installed, we filled in the center of the window with more studs, and we used pressure-treated boards here, although this wasn't necessary in retrospect. While Ray and Jason wrapped up the first window, I moved on to the next window in line and started getting the bottom of the window opening cleaned up. On the outside of the shop, Jason and Jono worked on getting the windows sheathed with that leftover Zip R material, and considering that these window openings were exactly 4 feet by 5 feet, they were super simple to sheathe with a single piece of Zip R. Once that was done, we could repeat the process on the next 2 window openings. The last thing to do was get some siding on the sheathing, and we used the fiber cement panels from the metalworking area in the old shop here, as they match the block exterior fairly well. And cutting these panels is a super dusty job, and this concrete saw made really quick work of the task. We used a siding nailer to attach the panels, and I'll probably come back and add some kind of trim just to dress up these openings a bit later. I also went back and added some sealant around the left, right, and top edge of the siding pieces, just to make sure no water worked its way in. With the windows done, we could move on to framing the walls, but first we needed to get everything cleared off the walls. And you can see that Nate and I started on this prior to the Perkins guys arriving, removing the existing shelving and the electrical runs on this wall. The other big thing that needed to be removed was the natural gas heater and the gas line running to the heater, which was directly in the way of where we needed to frame the walls. So we had an HVAC company come shut off the gas, and then we broke down the gas line into more manageable chunks with this little portaband. Finally, the HVAC technician capped off the line to close the opening in the line, and then he got the gas turned back on and checked for leaks, which there weren't any. Once the gas line was dealt with, we cut the heater free of the threaded rod it was hanging from, and then dropped it onto some scaffolding to keep it mobile. And I'll be installing mini splits in this space in the future, which are both much quieter and take up a lot less space than this monstrous heater, but it was definitely a bit of a bummer to lose our only heat source here in the shop. With the heater out of the way, Eric and I took a quick detour around the back of the building because with the heater now officially out of commission, it meant we could get rid of the giant vent pipe for the heater, which was blocking the doors leading into the attic. And after removing the pipe, we headed up to the attic to get the doors opened up, and this was a little easier said than done. So evidently the previous owner knew that they wouldn't be using the doors since the vent pipe was in the way, so they consequently nailed the doors shut. This was nothing a little sledgehammer work couldn't fix, however, and in no time we had the door open. And after removing one last pesky nail, the door was operational again.
Heck yeah!
Maybe you can get another log for a ramp too.
Yeah.
Go ahead and get
Well, I was planning to build a little platform out here, you know, like a little deck type of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And you'd have good access down there.
Yeah.
That's gonna make this upstairs way more usable.
I can back a truck up.
We got back on track and went ahead and plugged the hole in the side of the building left by the vent pipe with a little rigid foam and sealant, and then it was time to get to framing. So I had the material for the walls delivered a few days before the Perkins guys showed up, and was once again so thankful to have this big 10x10 roll top door leading into the shop, as the material could just be dropped off inside right where we needed it.
Nice.
So on to the framing. We got started by getting our top and bottom plates set in place, but this was a little tricky due to the severe bow in the middle of these walls. And we wanted the studs to be in contact with the wall in the center, as the support created by these walls was kind of the entire point of building them, and Eric came up with a simple but very effective technique for marking the locations of the plates. So first he took a straight 2x6 and held it tight to the center of the wall and plumbed the board with a level. Next, we can mark where the board intersected the joists in the floor above and at the slab. We then repeated this process every 4 or 5 feet, and then once we had enough marks, we came back and connected the marks with a chalk line, and this was our layout line for the bottom and top plates.
You know, you go. No, you got it. You go.
We attached the bottom plate to the slab with a few concrete anchors, and these were just to hold the plate in place while we worked, as I needed to come back and connect the plates to the slab with 3/4 inch anchor bolts as specified by the structural engineer who came up with this whole plan. We got the top plate attached to the floor joist above with 3¼ inch long 16-penny galvanized nails, and the engineer called out a double top plate here for some reason, so we added a second top plate in the same manner, making sure to mark our stud layout on the bottom and top plates before installing that second top plate. Once the plates were in, we could start cutting the studs to fit and installing them, toe-nailing them to the plates. And we had to frame these walls in place like this, as the walls would have been impossible to stand up if we built them on the ground. Also, the slab level kind of ebbs and flows, and we could account for that by framing the walls in place. To further add to the strength of these walls, the engineer also spec'd joist hangers at the top and bottom of each stud, and thankfully I was able to pick up a pair of metal connector nailers prior to this, as we had roughly 180 joist hangers to install on these walls. And having 2 guns ended up working out great, as we could keep one gun loaded with 1.5 inch long joist hanger nails for the straight connections, and then keep the other gun loaded with 2.5 inch long nails for the diagonal connections. And from there, it was really just rinse and repeat until we got to the first diagonal wall brace, which we decided to just go ahead and remove since it was sitting there loose, clearly not under any load.
I'm Johnny Brook. Welcome to Jack.
It's not Jack unless the wall falls on you, man.
It wasn't doing anything.
With that out of the way, we kept chugging along with the framing, and we did decide to leave the second wall brace in place for the time being, as it actually seemed to be doing something. We needed to plane down the back edge of the bottom plates towards the end of this wall due to some excess mortar buildup at the bottom of the block, and I thought it'd be good to get some sweet slow-mo shots of the planing action.
Oh, that was nice. Yeah, I got it. I got it.
And hopefully that shot was worth getting covered in sawdust for, and let me know in the comments if it was.
Did you get it that time?
Yeah, I got it.
Anyway, we wrapped things up for day 1 shortly after, and I think we made really good progress on this first day. And it was crazy looking at the studs up against these bowed block walls. It was almost like an optical illusion, because it made the studs look insanely crooked, when in reality it was just the wall that was crooked. Also, Eric's technique of setting the plate location seemed to work perfectly, as you can see that pretty much every stud contacts the wall in the middle. Back for day 2, the guys got to work wrapping up the framing on the right wall, and it was a little tricky working around that natural gas line, but they got it done. And while they worked, Eric and I got the vapor retarder laid out for the back wall.
Yeah, it's not light.
Why is it so heavy?
Yeah, it's totally dense.
There you go. So we attached the Stego vapor retarder to the wall with this Stego Tack tape, and we went ahead and ran 3 rows of the tape before hanging the vapor retarder. And you might be asking why I'm even using this vapor retarder here, and it's really just an extra layer of protection, as this should help to keep excess moisture from building up behind this back wall, which is completely subgrade. And I think this is pretty simple peace of mind for a job like this. I also ended up adding this vapor retarder below the wooden platform that we built over the floor drain and frame straightener, and I'll cover that in the next video in this series. With the vapor retarder installed, we could get to framing the back wall, which was really just more of the same, except we needed to add some blocking where the top plates landed between the floor joists above. And while the guys wrapped up framing the rest of the wall, I came back and added blocking where the walls for the CNC room would meet up with the exterior walls, and rather than going with the typical kind of stud pocket that I would have used in the past here, I instead used this ladder blocking style, which saves a ton on materials versus a stud pocket. And I could use up lots of short offcuts for this ladder blocking, and the only real difference will be when I go to add the plywood wall sheathing, as I'll just need to pay more attention to where this blocking is during the installation. The guys got the rest of the back wall wrapped up, and with that, we could call the exterior wall framing done. All right guys, hopefully you enjoyed this one. I think getting these exterior walls framed out was a huge step in this project, and I am super excited with how everything's coming together. So next week's video, I'm gonna show you guys how we framed this room for my Avid CNC so that I could soundproof it, similar to what my buddy John Malecki did, as well as how we built this giant wooden platform over the floor drain and the frame straightener that were both cast into this slab. And this thing turned out great. So if you guys don't wanna miss that video, go ahead and get subscribed and ring the notification bell. Also, I'll have links to all the tools and materials I used in the video description below. And last, if you guys want to support me, I sell merch. I have plans for a lot of my woodworking projects, and I have both Patreon and YouTube members set up. So go check those out. All right, thanks for watching, y'all. And until next week's video, happy building.